meeting to order at 6, and we have all members of the ordinance committee present, and we have Attorney Weiner with us, and I believe it's either Pua or Jerry who is basically recording us now. I'm going to assume that's happening unless someone jumps in to tell me it's not.
Yes, this is Jerry. I'm recording and Pua is also on.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm taking a look at our agenda because we're going to follow that. We have minutes for both March 31st, 2002 and April 7th, 2002. If there's no objection, I'll entertain a motion to approve both with one motion.
So moved.
Thank you, David. Do we have a second? From Joe, thank you. Is there anything we need to change, adjust, edit in any way? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Joe, are you in favor? Excellent, thank you. That's unanimous. So with one motion, we've taken the first item off our agenda. Terrific. Now, next we have tax collector's request to adopt an ordinance pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes 12-129. Jerry, perhaps you can tell us, is this new, this option?
Apparently, it's a new provision in the statute that allows the towns to not have to give reimbursement for anything under $25. And it sounds like, again, I don't know if it's a mandatory thing, but Pat has recommended that we do it. It must be a burden on them to have to send these small checks to people. So I would say there would be nothing wrong with presenting this to the Board of Selectmen.
Great. So I guess what we would be suggesting, I'll make the motion that we recommend to the Board of Selectmen to add an ordinance to authorize the tax collector to retain payments in excess of the amount due, provided the amount of the excess payment is less than $25?
25, yeah.
I'm looking at one that says $5, but we'll say 25 if that's what the legislation says.
I think the legislation is 25.
Good. All right. Okay, so that's a motion. Do we have a second for that? And then we can discuss.
Second.
We have a second, David. Okay. Any discussion on this? Seems very straightforward. Sensible streamlining of government here. Yeah. Okay. So all those in favor of recommending this to the Board of Selectmen? Aye. That's unanimous. All right. Thank you very much. We're speeding through our agenda now. All right. So the next item on the agenda is review the next steps for the review of town ordinances. Now, if you remember from your minutes that we just approved, we had been asked as the ordinance committee to take a look at our ordinances that were relative to board towns and the town board and commission. And we made some good faith efforts. I think all of the liaisons went back to their boards and commissions and said, hey, would you guys consider meeting less frequently? You could do it every other month. We could change the ordinance so that you were required to meet less frequently, even quarterly. And or if you'd like to combine with other boards and commissions. No one seems to have taken us up on that offer. Is that a fair, yeah. And meanwhile, we have lots and lots of meetings happening. One of the things we discussed here was the sort of cost of governance here. Lots of time these boards and commissions are not self-sufficient. They're not taking their minutes and posting agendas and all that on their own. Obviously, that requires staff people more and more. I know, David, you and I have talked at the strategic plan committee meeting level about how we sort of have a lot of staff needs or staffing needs, and the question of how we afford to do that with existing staff and whether we can attract and retain staff that can do that kind of work. We talked at a previous ordinance committee about asking for more detail about that. Of course, it's not a good time to ask for additional detail when people are short-staffed to begin with. So we don't have any documents here about the cost, but I, for one, can say that I'm still concerned that we have a lot of boards and commissions. I know there's an awful lot to keep track of. We have all these legal requirements about posting agendas and minutes, et cetera. Not always up to date on that. That kind of alarms me that we're a little out over our skis when it comes to boards and commissions. So what should we do as an ordinance committee? Do you guys have thoughts about what we might recommend to the Board of Selectmen with this?
Many of our boards and commissions meet more frequently than are required in our ordinances. In fact, most of them do.
Yeah.
So short of saying you can't meet, I don't know what that would be.
Yeah, they're definitely not, we gave sort of a broad hint about what we were trying to do, but without any teeth in it, they are just doing what they want to do. Um, One thing I noticed from our strategic plan was we talked about establishing a joint community services ad hoc committee. Now, this sounds like it's going in the opposite direction. Let's create a new committee. But the purpose of that joint community services ad hoc committee would be to bring together recreation, library, and human services and ask them to study how they might be able to combine their efforts, both the departments that they're involved with as boards and commissions, but also their functioning as boards and commissions. So maybe that's one thing we can do. We certainly said we were going to do that in the strategic plan, create a joint committee that would meet at least once or twice to come up with a recommendation back to the Board of Selectmen. So perhaps that's something that we could take up tonight to say, in furtherance of our quest to streamline, Board of Selectmen, would you like to establish a joint study committee, essentially, for at least starting with community services? So that's recreation, library, human services. Is that a starting point? Or is that more meetings?
Uh, I don't know. I don't know if that's going to help the general situation that we see. It seems to me, in working through this last year and a half with some of the more active commissions, and the example is probably the library commission, because GATV is not, and recreation is is a little different as well. But a lot of this is driven by the always budgeting kind of process. We get a budget passed. It gets reconciled. It passes the town meeting, and then within 3 months we're back at it. And then there's sort of like August, nobody meets, and then in September everybody's up to capital budgets, and then so, and a lot of these meetings seem to revolve around that. So I'm not sure that I like your idea in general. I just am skeptical as to whether it really addresses that particular issue, which is people want to get together to talk about the budget.
Yeah, and I would think also timing wise, in order to have a joint committee that would study if these three units could start to meet jointly and sort of streamline down the road, you do need staff. And I know Tony Genovese has advised us that they're still in the process of trying to replace Betsy Yagla's position. So perhaps this is just a recommendation that has to wait until we know whether we could support it with staffing. Maybe that's where we're at.
To be clear, your purpose on this would really be long-term to just consolidate those three commissions into one, right?
Well, even the departments that they represent, right? So the library, the human services, and recreation, they have overlapping jurisdiction on things, right? They all have yoga classes. They all are putting out offerings for the community, sometimes in competition with each other. So
Yeah, I mean,
if
the
they work
library
together,
also,
they wouldn't compete.
library also has a lot of they deal a lot with their things like public relations, and also with their endowment that they have for the Friends money, because they have a significant budget that's off of our budget that really does help a lot, because it's a community organization to which people will make contributions, and so it's their agendas are pretty filled up with keeping track of that, and I think that's good. I just I don't know if, because they share certain functions, that it was easy enough to sort of put them together, because it does seem that they have some real specific issues to deal with, and that are quite a bit different than just people.
Yeah. So looking forward a little bit, when the community center is finished in the old firehouse, that's those three groups are meant to share that space. So I would think that
Mm.
more collaboration they could do. Maybe they could meet jointly every other meeting or something like that, just to sort of ease the burden here and facilitate the decision making without extra meetings. It's
Yeah,
something that we should
that
ask.
might be a workable solution to just schedule certain ones of their meetings instead of the meeting that they were going to have joint meetings. And those might come at times of the year that would still allow for the budgeting and the complicated work that they all do.
Yeah. So I don't know if that would necessarily come back to ordinance at all, but it is if we were tasked as the ordinance committee to think about all these boards and commissions, that's our thought back. So maybe we can communicate that to the full board of selectmen and see what the first selectman would like to do with it. Fully recognizing that timing may not be good to do it right now, but at least come back with our thoughts.
Well, where are we then with some of the ad hoc committees and commissions? Because those seem to be growing rather than getting fewer.
Yeah.
We're
Yes.
about, somehow we're getting a housing committee going. We've got lots of building committees. We've got a 2030 committee. We've got a lot of things. If we're going to cut back on the administrative requirements, we're going to have to cut back on that kind of thinking.
Yeah, certainly things that sort of, so community council and the diversity, equity, inclusion, maybe they could merge. That was a thought we had at one point. We also talked about Coupop conservation, agricultural,
Mhm.
economic development. They all kind of are trying to address the same thing, and certainly 2030 is trying to address that too. So I think for the purposes of this meeting, I think, we have a few ideas here. I'll try to put in writing what these are, send them back to Beth and see what the selectmen would like to do. I don't
Yeah,
think there's an ordinance, there's no ordinance fix here unless someone has a recommendation to do that.
well, I suppose we could, I mean, the ordinance now sets the minimum number for them to meet. It doesn't really set a maximum.
Right, yeah, it doesn't. You could say no more than 12 per year. You cannot meet more than monthly.
That would, it's,
Yeah. Well, that is definitely thought. Um, Anything else for this review of town ordinances? I did have um, two things. One is the when we talk about the length of the or the number of meetings that boards and commissions have. So I was looking up in municipal agencies 75.5 in ordinances. Membership in terms of office does specifically say that they're appointed by the Board of Selectmen biannually as of the first day of July in odd numbered years. And it occurs to me if we change that to January in even numbered years, then that's a clear fix that addresses the question of when terms start. Jerry, is that something we could go ahead as an ordinance and just make that change by, sending it to a hearing and then making the change to the ordinance?
We can do an ordinance to, yes, the answer is yes, we can.
Okay, so maybe what we can do is that's one. And then David, are you serious in the suggestion to say we want a maximum of 12 meetings per year? Please don't meet more than that. So we want to.
I don't know how you really do that. So many of these boards have subcommittees that meet on other things like personnel and, and bylaws and all kinds of things that probably don't take up a lot of staff time, but
Wow.
it would be kind of interesting maybe if the board could review with the people who are the professional staff who are involved in these things to find out how much of their time is spent servicing just the needs of the boards or the commissions, because that really doesn't seem to be the best use of their time.
Well, I know the town clerk's office would like to give us input about how much time they're spending on just posting commission meetings and minutes, et cetera. So,
Yeah.
all right. So why don't we can advise the Board of Selectmen that we're going to look into it further, but one change we'd like to, is it the case that we'd like to make this change to, change from July in odd number years to January in even numbered years for the terms? Does that sound right? All right, so that,
I mean, to Jerry's earlier point at the board meeting, at some point, we will have to reconcile that language within this charter.
Yeah, when we do a charter revision, that would also be a topic that the commission should take up. It
Yeah.
perhaps could do that summarily rather than having to go to a referendum. That seems to be a procedural thing,
Sure,
also a substantive thing.
but that's beyond the scope of the ordinance committee. That would have to be a separate.
Right. That would have to be charter revision, right? So the ordinance committee can probably wait until charter revision does it, or you can pass it, or you can think about doing an ordinance. That would be okay too.
so I think our previous motion to send the tax collector piece to the Board of Selectmen, that's going to cause a public hearing to be noticed, right, Jerry? We have to have a
Yes,
public hearing.
well, the Board of Selectmen will have to have a discussion and a motion to set a public hearing. They're the
Right.
ones who set the public hearing. Yes, but
So-
you have to have public hearings on every single ordinance. Every single proposed ordinance.
Right. So if we're having a public hearing on one thing, we could also say, all right, and we're also going to change this July to January language as well, get the public input on that, and then make the decision just to make the edit in the ordinance, right?
Correct.
Okay. So do we want to make a motion to send that request along as well? Is that?
Sure.
I'll make the motion. You can
Seconded.
Okay. All right. All those in favor? Aye, that's unanimous. Okay, thank you. Let me pull back here. So, so that is town ordinances. I guess the other thing, when I went through the minutes, I saw that our PFOS, the environmental hazards piece that we discussed at our last two meetings, I guess, we were waiting to see if there was going to be state statute changes or a new, state statute coming out on that. Jerry, do you know if they did anything in the last legislative session?
They have not, as far as I know, and there were some national regulations I don't know if it's a regulation, but there were some national reports that came out. I think the state is still studying it. I have not seen anything where they did anything on that as yet.
All right, so perhaps, so we were waiting to see about that. Now you can always wait for the next legislative session because there's always another one. But maybe we can check in with folks and find out if there's anything that we could use to model language for our own ordinance, or whether we should be waiting to see if there's further guidance from the state or the federal government.
Yep.
So I'd like to just check on that, and at our next meeting, we could perhaps take it up if we find there's anything to take up. Because of course, I think it's still a very serious issue. We want to protect the environment if we can do that in ordinance. And then lastly, I think the other ordinance that I'm interested in seeing if we can do anything about is there's been some talk of inclusionary zoning and mechanisms by which you can do that in ordinance. It can also obviously be a zoning regulation. It can also be included in the plan of conservation development. I think that would be a zoning regulation in POCD. But I'd like us to, at our next meeting, be able to see if anybody is doing it by way of an ordinance and what that might look like and what our options might be, because I think it would be an important message to send that the Board of Selectmen is serious about inclusionary zoning and making Woodbridge a more inclusionary place. And if this is a good way to do it, we should take it up as an ordinance committee. So perhaps we can do that at our next meeting, but I think we need to do a little research first to find out if those options are viable or not. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, that sounds good.
I always want to sound reasonable. All right, do you guys, do either of you have other ordinances you'd like us to be looking into or researching for future? All right, I think with that, we're done with what we had on our agenda. We do say at the end, Jerry Shaw has included dates for future meetings. I don't know that we're going to have one in December, though. I don't think we would be ready. We're going to be quite busy with the capital budget. Let's wait and see what the Board of Selectmen thinks in December. If they want us to move forward and have a meeting in January, perhaps we could consider the calendar for January. Do you guys have other thoughts? Do you want to meet sooner, later, never again? How do you feel?
I think we should meet. I think there's still a lot of things out there that are for us to consider. So
Does January sound like a good time frame?
Sure.
January?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I saw your thumbs up there, Joe. All right, if there's nothing else.
Probably not early January. I'm likely to be out of town then, but I can always do it on a WebEx, but I won't have as much access. But
Okay.
that's, mid to late January would be ideal for me.
All right, that sounds great. I can see if we can find someone to just poll our members and find a good date for that. All
Okay.
right. All right, if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. From Joe, okay, second. From David, all right, all those in favor? Aye, that's unanimous. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sheila.